Welcome to the first screencast for the Atlas of Biological Work, or atlasbiowork for short. I'm Peter Donovan with the Soil Carbon Coalition. I've done a lot of monitoring, and I've noticed that many people don't realize that it's possible and even practical to monitor trends in soil health or watershed function. With Atlas BioWork, we hope to make that more practical and more participatory. What we're going to cover in this first screencast is why, the design principles that follow the purpose, what's a web app, and how our data is structured and stored. In part 2, we'll give some examples of how to use atlasbiowork.com. These problems are mostly old ones, and we've spent billions on them. Can you think of successes? Where we've had success, the solutions we choose often grow other problems or contribute to increasing problems elsewhere. We might eliminate the weeds or pests, but inadvertently cause land degradation, extinction, flooding and drought, or pollution. Yes, these problems are all related. Let's say we work in an agency or organization. If we want to keep our jobs and budget allocations, we may need to pretend that these problems are separate or can be addressed separately. That water issues can be separated from soil function, for example. In order to see the bigger picture, the whole, we may need to relax our focus on problems. But much of our activity in support systems, data collection, programs, plans, the media, are focused on the problems. We may not see that it's possible or practical to focus on opportunities, whole systems, or to measure progress with these. Atlas BioWork is designed to make an orientation around wholes, around the fundamental processes and cycles of nature, such as carbon cycling and water cycling, a practical, participatory activity. It's about framing possibility. On the left, we have an orientation around problems and fears. This isn't bad, it's normal. It just doesn't work very well in situations of true complexity, such as managing, interacting with nature. The foundation is narrow. A small number of researchers study some standardized practices with a few research plots. Diversity of opinion is a threat. With the right-hand structure, diversity is an asset in sharing local evidence. On the left, the structure is primarily based on theory, with an emphasis on prediction as the criteria of scientific validity. On the right, we have a much more place-based orientation. A shared intelligence. An intelligence, in order to be shared, must be place-based. We need to know the context or the situation of the land. And that's in terms of people, the land itself, the economics and culture, and so on. Shared evidence comes about through shared observations. Observations can have many dimensions. Small area or point observations may not accurately represent the situation or trend in larger areas because every place is different. But point observations can help us learn this variability and some of the dynamics behind it. The best is to combine point and area observations. They can add value to each other. Here's an example of a time series, and remember we're using the dimension of time as well. A time series of photosynthesis or normalized vegetation index, normalized difference vegetation index, over an area in western Nebraska. And here we have a comparison between a 3-year composite from 85 to 87 versus 2009 through 2011, and the change is indicated by the color. If the pixel is white, that means there's basically been no change between those widely separated composites. If it's green, it's improved. In other words, we're capturing more sunlight energy in plants. And if it's red, we've decreased our capture of sunlight energy in plants over that period of time. Or subtracting one from the other, you might say. Here's an example of change over time in a point site, which also has depth. I've sampled 3 layers here, 0 to 10 centimeters, 10 to 20 centimeters, 25 to 35 20 to 35 centimeters of soil, and measured carbon using a laboratory analysis over time, over a 3-year period. And we got some significant increases. This is on Neil Dennis's property in Saskatchewan. And this is an example of how you can build a time series with a point observation. Now, in order to build a time series, to use that time dimension of trend or progress toward possibility, we need repeatable observations. And repeatability has several ingredients. Location is extremely important. Accurate location, sometimes beyond what common GPS receivers can offer. The measurement needs to be practical, affordable, and accurate enough. If it costs $50 million to do this research project over this huge area, it's probably not going to be easily repeated. Open data is extremely important. The tradition in agriculture is not to share data. With litigation over environmental issues such as water quality or endangered species, people's concerns over privacy are reinforced. With the Soil Carbon Challenge, for example, which is a project I've been involved in over the past 6 years, I've not found much fear over public geolocated data about soil carbon. Many people are proud to show what they've done, and even if they haven't succeeded in growing soil carbon, it's not a topic of fear or shame for them. But I think open data is needed for real repeatability and a shared intelligence. Lots of data is collected. It sits on a shelf, somebody's hard drive, in a cardboard box in somebody's flooded basement. And when you lose the baseline data, you can't repeat it. And thus we can't generate a time series. And last but not least, in order to make repeatable observations, we have to have people able and willing to make them and record them. And that's why we've built this atlasbiowork.com app. Because it makes it easier to make observations and record them. A web app, an application, is one that operates in the browser. In other words, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, and so forth. It can store data on your device even when you're out of cell range. It can upload or synchronize this data to an online database and can work on almost any device with a browser, such as a smartphone, an iPad, a laptop, or a desktop. To use a web app in the field, you should definitely practice beforehand. You probably will need to allow the app to access your GPS location, possibly even your camera. You've got to be logged in to upload or synchronize data. And in order to use the app offline, you must store it. In other words, you need to select Add to Home Screen from the browser menu. And don't forget to always take backups. Pencil and paper an auxiliary battery for your device, and so forth. How data is structured and stored. Typically, we store data in spreadsheet tables, rows and columns. This works very well. It sometimes offers a very rigid data structure that sometimes is hard to fit to the demands or the needs of a particular person or place. Not everybody can generate data that fits this kind of spreadsheet. And we often end up with lots of blank values. There's other ways to structure data, and given that our app concentrates on place-based is a place-based orientation, everything rests on a site which has geography. So the site is the foundation, and observations are built on top of the site. So it's place-based, and then we have repeatable observations stacked on top of the site, and on each other. And actually this becomes a tree structure, even though this diagram doesn't look much like a tree. For example, we have a site, and the gray box above that could be a transect, for example. The light blue box on top of that could be a soil sample with an analysis, say, of carbon and nitrogen, or the Haney test, or a PLFA, or something like that. And then the narrow light blue box on top of that could be a subsequent soil sample, again with analyses built onto that. So it's like a Lego structure. Everything must connect, but you have a lot of freedom in what you can connect. And our data types can all be connected to each other. A comment, for example, is also a data type. You can connect that to any other observation, or even to a site. So it's a very flexible and creative structure. As I've said, it's a little bit like a Lego set. And we can also offer you any kind of brick you want, basically. It's very flexible. And here's an example of a site. This is a screenshot from the app. And we have the options of viewing the observations or to add an observation to this site. But observations cannot exist independently of a site. They must be tied to the land. They must be place-based. They must be grounded. And we hope that they are repeatable. The design process for this atlasbiowork.com app hasn't been the addition of features. It's more about leaving them out, because so many of them get in the way of the purpose, which is to seek possibility, to learn how to work with carbon and water cycling, and to figure out what works. To figure out what works based on shared evidence. The best way to predict the future is to create it. Should we add more ladders so as to get a better view? By removing some ladders, we may be better able to see the possibility of using one ladder differently. The removals that we've done for atlasbiowork.com include the removal of a rigid data structure, or the need to have a strict replication or protocol across all sites, and the provision for proprietary or secret data, and locking up silos of data that are inaccessible. So to summarize, We believe that taking responsibility for our future means a shared, localized intelligence with accountability for results. So the app and the framework is open source, it's free to use and adapt. We have flexible place-based data structures to accommodate broad participation and local situations with various dimensions. We can accommodate citizen observations and research results. And we can juxtapose these on interactive maps with multiple layers. And data is shareable and it's not in silos. In part 2, we'll show you how to use atlasbiowork.com in a live demonstration.